Sego, and welcome to Let's Talk. It is July 7th, 7/7/17 is the date today. I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on great stations like The Gwe, CKWE, and Tandanega. Rebroadcast also on Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio. You can contact us here at 855-967-0463. That's the number to call in if you want to be a part of the show. We're going to revisit a little bit of what we talked about last week and then expand on the thought a little bit. But let me introduce. I'm John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined by Matt Hill on the board.
Yeah.
I've got Ed Schindler joining us for commentary as well. Our studio engineer is Kelly McMillan. And off camera as well is Jake Proud, who's recording us both with the Mevo camera for our Facebook live stream and recording us for our Let's Talk Native TV channel or YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. So we appreciate the work that Jake's doing as well. Look, we opened up with a Buffy Sainte-Marie song. In case you didn't know what that song is, that song was the Oscar award-winning song for Officer and a Gentleman back in the day. She wrote the melody and for that won a Golden Globe, won an Academy Award, and for Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes, who actually recorded the song for the movie, it would be Joe Cocker's biggest hit. So the reason I wanted to play some Buffy tunes, and we'll play
really that was his biggest hit.
That was his biggest hit. It was bigger than all of the other Joe Cocker songs, and of course we know so many of them. He did the cover of the Beatles tune, "Don't Let Me Down." What would you? What's that? What would you do if I sang it? What's that? A little help for my friends. Little help for my friends. Yeah, and of course he did. You Are So Beautiful. Did some great tunes. But his biggest hit is a Buffy Sainte-Marie tune.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
pretty.
Cool.
Now the reason I wanted to, and we'll play some more Buffy, is she's performing in New York City. She joined me on my show yesterday in New York. She's performing on Sunday in Central Park at the Summer Stage. It's a free concert. It's part of their summer series of events, and she's got a Tribe Called Red playing with her and Isque. So it should be a pretty significant concert. Starts at 6 p.m. From 6 to 10 p.m. tomorrow in New York City. It should be an incredible show. New York was part of her home. Before she moved out to Hawaii, and coming out of Massachusetts, where she studied music. She came to New York and was part of the Greenwich Village scene, and New York is again one of her homes. So the idea that she's coming back to New York in New York City in particular is pretty. It's like a homecoming for her. So we'll play some of her tunes. Obviously, we play Universal Soldier, and we'll play that for you before the show is done. It is a classic song. It's a song that I think that has, one of the more powerful messages. But there's just something about putting even a powerful message to music that makes it more accessible, makes it a little bit more easily received, I guess. And we'll play some of her newer stuff as well. But my hat's off to Buffy Sainte-Marie. I want to thank her for joining me in New York. It was great to have her visit and be a part of the show. Look, here's what I want to talk about today. Last week I talked about the Sean Snyder case where he was fined by New York State $1.29 million, and he filed a petition to make that fine go away, and he did it. I mean, it was successful. Now, I don't want to belabor the point about my involvement in that case. I did testify as a witness, an expert witness on Native history in that case. But I would also go so far as to say that there were other things that were used in that case that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about not just because I was involved in it. But the reason I want to talk about it is because what we need to understand is what how the power that we do have, because I think when we're faced with this adversity from the state or the federal government, we sometimes think that that fight is either unwinnable, or that there are so very few options on how do you fight against the state? How do you fight against the authority outside? The police, the courts, the politicians, the legislation, all of it. How do you do that? And I would dare say that we have demonstrated, not only with Matt fighting a speeding ticket here on the res, but even beyond having a court just dismiss a speeding ticket for whatever reason. We have had impact, and of course, a lot of times people defer to their representatives, whether it's guys on segregation council or people in a traditional council, chiefs or councilmen or whatever else. From a Native perspective, everybody looks to leadership, to their elected leadership, oftentimes to fight that battle, and frankly, that's not necessarily where it's going to come from. So, what I wanted to explain was some of what both Matt and I were engaged in on the tax issue. Matt took more so just to be a kind of a ride along, but I went to Albany long before this thing with Sean John or any of this stuff. Back when the state was really trying to stop native tobacco, back when they were trying to stop our sales of tobacco in general. In fact, what they were claiming was that they were going to force us to buy taxed product for our sales, and that somehow the state would gain revenue from that, which is obviously pretty absurd. But in the midst of them trying to force their New York State wholesalers to apply a tax to our purchases, we developed the native brands, and we developed it in such a way that even with the loss of the national premium brands of the United States, Marlboro, Newports, Salem's, Winston, with giving those up on our store shelves, we managed to create a wide inventory of native brands. Native brands, some made locally here by Haudenosaunee, other native brands that were made across the country. King Mountain comes to mind, and that was the brand that, by the way, that Sean was transporting to Ganyonge from Cattaraugus when he was stopped, had the load seized, and then was issued this fine for over $1 million. But what we had done, and what I initiated first with a phone call, which was to go see a couple of state senators. Among the things that I wanted to do was sit down with them and explain what I thought, or what our position is, or certainly what my opinion was on the issue of state interference, but then encourage them to do what we weren't able to do. And here's what I'm talking about. I went and first had a sit-down meeting with George Maziarz. Matt was a part of that meeting. In fact, my friends James and Paul showed up. They just happened to want to come down and join us. So there we sat, four of us, and one state senator and his assistant, and we talked about the failure of New York State to show any distinction to native trade, even as they were trying to stop premium brands from coming onto our territories. Not only did we find that very problematic, from our own interest standpoint, but it even seemed to violate the ruling that they always hold up as their landmark decision, empowering them to tax us, which it's not, which is ATIA. And I talked about that last week. And clearly the language in ATIA made it very, very clear that the Supreme Court justices who ruled in that case and ruled that that the non-native wholesaler, the ATIA brothers, that their federal Indian trader's license did not supersede state law. That was really what the ruling was. But in the language associated with that case, they made it very clear that taxing a product before it comes to our territory, almost a pre-collection of tax to something that we would sell to a non-native, that we simply just purchased and resold. The state's right to do that stood on completely different ground, markedly different footing is the way they said it. from taxing us directly, taxing a native person, a native trader, a native retailer, or taxing a product that we had that we had some role in, that we added value to, is the word, the language that they use. So, a product that we have some stake in, you know, whether it's because we manufacture it here, or whether because it's a brand we developed here, or our marketing, or whatever it is. I mean, and this isn't limited just to tobacco, but this is in that ATIA case. So when we went to George Maziarz, we said, look, the federal ruling that the state is trying to base its authority on makes a very, very clear distinction between native brands, a native value-added product, and a non-value-added product. So the fact that the tax department wasn't acknowledging that is, well, it's wrong, and it's unfounded in their own law. So when we went out to meet with George Maziarz, we said, we want you to ask the question of the tax department is, what is your position? Because they won't answer us. When we say, you tell us what your position is, because we don't even know what to fight against. So if you're not willing to tell us what your position is on native to native trade, on native brands, if you're not willing to tell us what your intentions are, then that actually violates your own law. Your laws are such that when you pass them, you have an obligation, and again, fancy word, to promulgate what that legislation is, to announce clearly, to put it out into the public, what laws that you are either claiming to operate under, or and what your policy is associated with those laws. So since they wouldn't answer us, I said to Senator Maziarz, who was a Republican at the time, and we also enlisted the help of Tim Kennedy, and I actually helped draft the letter that they sent to Thomas Maddox, who was the Commissioner of Taxation and Finance for New York State, and asked the question. They flat out asked the question: What's the state's position? As legislators, as elected officials of the state of New York, we have a right to know, as do the people of the state of New York, and certainly the people that you're targeting with this potential policy. So they asked that question, but then they went further than that. They actually said, we want to know what your policy is, because it is our belief that native to native trade is something the state does not have the authority to get involved in, and any action the state would take against a native brand violates the sovereignty of native peoples. So they asked the question, and they established what their position was. So I bring this up because I wasn't sent there as an official envoy for any tobacco company, for any retailer, for any nation. I went there because it sounded like there were two state senators that at least I could have an audience with.
It was based on principle.
Well, and the bottom line is I wanted to have this conversation because nobody else was having it. And these were some of the issues that were not being adequately addressed. So we went there, raised the question. They frankly agreed with us. They were willing to put their names on that paper and send it to the tax department. And then they gave me the permission to make it public that they had done such a thing.
It seemed like one hand didn't know what the other one was doing. I mean, one side they're trying to, do the raids and confiscate stuff, and on the other hand, they were trying to get money through the other agreement here.
Well,
or not even an agreement. It was just a.
Well, yeah, they claimed that they were somehow going to generate revenue from our sales. At the same time, they were doing what they could do to really shut our sales down. The bottom line is they thought if we didn't sell tobacco, that they'd sell more tobacco, and so they would somehow see an uptick in the revenue stream that way, which didn't happen. But you're right, and part of it isn't just that one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing. One hand didn't want to show their hand, and that was the tax department. That was the Cuomo. Actually, it was the Patterson administration, I think, at the time. So they were intentionally withholding the information associated with their policy, that like they were keeping it a secret, and that's frankly against their law, not against our law. So part of this whole thing, and this is the point that I wanted to make with the show today. We have more options and we have more strategies if we are willing to employ them, and you don't have to be a hired lobbyist. You don't have to be a hired lawyer. You don't have to be a lawyer yourself.
It didn't cost us anything more than parking and gas to get there.
Well, and of course you had to withstand listening to me talk for 5 hours.
Can I tell that story real quick?
Yeah, we can tell that story.
Okay, we're gonna go for a ride. John picks me up. As soon as I get in the car, he shuts the radio off. He didn't stop talking the whole way there and all the way back. So I had to listen to that anyway. So
it's called indoctrination.
Yeah,
I was trying to win Matt over.
It was a learning process.
But yeah, and it was great to have Degar Rundige and
they just happened to be in town.
Well, they were coming down that way, and so we planned this. We actually worked this out on the way out there, so
Yeah,
it wasn't a planned thing. So, and of course we all have. You're probably the only one who had never had a sit down with George Maziar. I think James.
Anybody that was my first experience in going into like a government office or anything like that.
And look how easy and how successful it was.
Yeah.
I mean, so beyond having to listen to me talk for 5 hours, that time there in the senator's chambers, you got a chance to see what diplomacy really looks like.
That was only 20 minutes, half hour or so. Didn't take very long at all.
I mean, and after we left that meeting, he said, "Would you be willing to draft a letter?" So I went home and I drafted the letter. They pretty much used what I wrote, and actually, I never asked them to weigh in on what their position was. They added that whole thing when they said it is our opinion that that I wasn't trying to put necessarily those words in their mouths. So they were willing to again make a solid statement about their as state senators. There and keep in mind, Tim Kennedy was a Democrat, Maziar is a Republican. So this was the whole idea of reaching out to two senators from two different parties, and I think they're both on. At the time, they had a Senate committee on Indian affairs or something like that. So I think they were both sitting on that committee as well. So I mean, they were the right people to talk to, I guess. And again, wasn't asking them. I wasn't lobbying them for a piece of legislation. I said, just ask the question. So that letter gets issued like in May or something like that. Only a couple of months later, they don't get a response. Mind you, they don't get a response from the tax commissioner. They get no response. However, I get an email from a reporter from the New York Post, who was writing a story about the state chasing down tobacco revenue. And he actually emailed me or sent me mailed it to me, a copy of an interdepartment memo from the tax department, basically laying out their internal policy on seizing tobacco from native carriers. And while we never got a direct answer, this was the closest thing to it, and it came literally a month and a half, less than 2 months after the Maziar's letter became public. Do you got it right there in front of you? What's it?
Oh,
yeah.
May.
Oh no, it's on the other document. But yeah. But anyway, so this response, which is not to us, it's to their own agents, makes it clear that they knew the question was being asked, and that at least from an internal standpoint, they had a policy. So these two letters exist at this point, and this is in 2011. These two letters exist: the letter from George Maziarz and Tim Kennedy, and the interdepartment memo from the tax department. Both of which, one says do not seize native brands from native carriers, especially going from one native territory to a native territory, and the other is from the legislators, the ones who actually passed the laws that these guys claim that they're upholding. That says it's our view that the state doesn't have the authority to interfere with native to native trade. So these letters are a direct response from the work that we did, and that's my point. My point is, we think sometimes our battles with the state have to be knockdown dragouts in the throughway. There's a time for that, and I'm an advocate for that kind of civil disobedience.
That's the first move, though, is to go and talk to them, because George Maziar didn't have any idea that was even an issue
right
at the time. He just the thing about that is you stated your points, and he just sat there and shook his head, and I can see it. He pointed it out to him, and he understood
and responded appropriately. And again, just man to man, human being to human being. I mean, I don't mean man as in man versus female, but person to person.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have an intelligent conversation. There was no threatening. There was no, you know, I didn't, you know, embellish the state's, you know,
There were no
intent or anything else.
envelopes handed out.
Yeah, there's no payment, there's no money under the table, nothing like that. It was just to have just a straightforward conversation. So, and I'm bringing this up because these issues also had direct effect on Sean's petition challenging that $1.29 million fine that he was assessed. The judge. This was actually this was an opportunity for me to talk about those letters since I had a role in them. So in terms of laying the foundation, that was part of my testimony. So it gave me the opportunity to talk about it and the intent and where it came from. And I talked about everything from the Atia case. I gave that judge a real history lesson. But in her ruling, in her findings of fact, she didn't cover all this stuff, but she did talk about the Mazie Arch Kennedy letter. She did talk about the interdepartment memo. So again, I'm not a hired lobbyist. I did this stuff because it was the principle of thing. It was just the right thing to do, and I felt like I had the background to have that conversation. Clearly, Matt, this was your first experience seeing something like that play out, and you could see that while we oftentimes find ourselves in very, very ugly, tense situations with powers that be, especially the state police. I mean, I think about what took place in Onondaga back in '97, or what took place in Standing Rock, for that matter. But if before you get to that place, you can sit down without being smug, without being arrogant, without being threatening, without being pitiful. Sit down and have a conversation and do so with integrity and with not just diplomacy,
Good talking points.
and with enough background on what you're talking about. So again, Matt, how many times have we heard people say, "I'm glad you guys talked about that. I've always felt that, but I didn't know how to put it into
Yeah.
words." So that's kind of what we do here with the show. You don't need to have a radio show to do this stuff. So my point is, we have an opportunity to educate ourselves.
I do that at work all the time, guys. That they hear things on the radio or TV, and they kind of got a half idea stuff they read in the Buffalo News or something, and it's totally all wrong stuff. And no, wait a minute, then you tell them a few facts, and they say, "Oh yeah, well, that makes sense."
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of just thought exchange, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of my point, and so this might be a big deal with something like this message?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at it here. This might be a big deal with things like, like our commerce, but it also relates back to things like the mascot issue. I'm now engaged in another conversation because a school up near Akwesasne, they call themselves the Red Raiders, and they're taking a look at that because it's been raised by a number of students about that name being problematic. Now, sure, it's not as offensive as Redskins, but it still is this appropriation, and for the most part, and not always, I've learned, but when people use an expression like Red Men or Red Raiders, almost always it's usually a reference to Native people. So, but again, diplomacy. I think about the role we played with Lancaster changing their names, and you sat and witnessed the committee that I was a part of there in a public session. And while there were certainly residents of Lancaster that were really vehemently opposed to a name change, the more thoughtful people who sat on that board were willing to hear us and listen to us, and they unanimously voted to get rid of the thing. So I don't know what am I looking at here?
You got a caller.
Oh, are they online right now?
Not right now. I told them to call at the bottom of the hour.
Okay, well maybe they'll call. We'll take a break here. When we come back, we'll look at trying to pull this caller in. So we'll do that. Let's go to a break. Let's do another Buffy song. What are you gonna do here? No, Keshagesh?
Yep, I forgot to pull up the other one. Sorry.
All right, yeah, no, Keshagesh. That's a good song. So we'll go out. This is again Buffy St. Marie performing in New York this weekend. If you're in New York on Sunday, get to Central Park. right, thanks for coming back. Again, that's another powerful song. That's a more recent song from Buffy St. Marie, and some. I mean, look that one up. I mean, if you want to go to her, go to her. I pulled her up on SoundCloud. I don't know if on Reverb Nation, but these are some of the powerful songs that she's done. Maybe we'll play. Maybe we'll go out with Universal Soldier.
I could do that.
And at the top of the hour. But yeah, some good stuff there. Look, I want to acknowledge our sponsors. Native Let's Talk Native is sponsored by Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. Eric White and ERW Enterprises. By friends of the show like Ed Schindler, sitting in here in studio, Tracy Brown, Cynthia Trice, Scott Snyder, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and many others who have helped this program continue to educate, entertain, and inform for the last 7 years. We're in our 8th year now. I thank all of you for doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Net Radio for providing our stream. I also want to thank CKWE for not only providing us with simulcast on our Monday shows, but a rebroadcast of our Friday shows, and providing us with our phone connections.
Like the one we got right now.
Like the one we've got right now. I also want to acknowledge Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio, and all of you who share the show. Because you can share not only the video we shoot with our Mevo, the Facebook live stream, but the YouTube video that Jake puts together that we post up, and of course we do post the audio up on SoundCloud, so that is also shared. So all of you who are either catching the audio or the video and then sharing it, you guys are all a part of helping us spread the word. As I said, CKWE in Tyendinaga provides us with access to callers. So when I give you that number, when I put that number 855-967-0463, when I put that number out there, you're actually going to call into CKWE, and we do have a caller who has called. And I apologize to Carla, because I know I got your message, but and it was my intent to get back to you. So I'm really thrilled that you called in. You're going to fill us in a little bit about some of what people don't know about that very oil that is being shipped out of the Bakken crude area. So go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, so Sego first off.
Sego.
And my Indian name first came to me in Mohawk, so I'll introduce myself as Waihanohara. And when it was translated into Ojibwe for me, it's Mianakoi, which means berry woman, and very nice to meet you all. And I am from the Loon clan.
Mm-hmm.
And my English name is Carla, and I am from Winnipeg, Manitoba. My reserve is Sagin First Nation, which is also called Port Alexander, Manitoba. I'm originally a Fontaine. I am related to the Phil Fontaine. Please, nobody hold that against me. And I mean that very seriously. And however,
just so people know, Phil Fontaine was a former AFN chief, wasn't he? The head of the AFN at one time.
Yes, he was.
Okay, just so people understand.
And he was also a big player with the Keystone Project in Alberta. He had everything to do with the Alberta pipeline.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and fill us in about what you had left me in a voicemail and what you'd like to talk about, because I know this has to do with, frankly, the corruption that exists within our territories as far as those people who are exploiting our lands, and of course not just exploiting our lands, but exploiting the people who are associated with those lands. So go ahead.
Yes, I have quite the story that's happening in Canada. I've been fighting with this now since January 2016. My father's name is John Lang. He is German, and he was a gold miner, and he was an engineer, and he was a smart businessman. He inherited vineyards from Germany from the rest of his family. I didn't realize the estate was as large as it was. He had minerals, he had natural resources, and not to mention gold bars and quite a few other things. So one of the things, though, with the oil up in the Bakken is that what they did was they led me to believe Scotiabank, Chris Chipman, and Thomas Dorfman and Sletman, Peter Galacki, led me to believe back in the day that my father didn't leave a power of attorney and that they were the only power of attorney. And because they got so greedy with that, they presented me with an enduring power of attorney and named off all the stuff that they were in charge of. They didn't think I still had that document. And in 2010 is when my father died. 2011, they believed they embezzled that whole estate. That's when they Mark Chipman was a district attorney in North Dakota at that point, and my oil was in the Beacon there by Rosal River, Manitoba, and they turned around and they set up that whole laundering that oil. They were actually laundering that oil through North Dakota already since 2006, and they were taking out 577,000 barrels of oil per day is what they said in the media. However, it's way larger than that. They just cut that down in the media to say that. And then once Mark Chipman knew and Chris Chipman knew that they thought they got away with embezzling the estate, Mark Chipman moved back from North Dakota into Winnipeg, bought the Winnipeg Jets with my money, and then started the MTS building as one of my subdivisions. They turned around, they took over that. They built True North over there with my money. When I confronted the person that claimed that they owned MTS building, I phoned him up in Toronto and I said, I got video recordings of all of this, that me phoning and confronting. All these people know I took video recordings of all of this and still answered me very arrogantly and like they didn't have to answer to me about my father's estate at all. So when I confronted him, I said, so you're the one that's claiming you sold the MTS building to the Chipmans? I said, I'm going to ask you right now, how could you sell that property when it belonged to my father, John Lang? And then he tried to say,
back up a little bit because I want. I understand. So your father is non-native. Is there native
That's
title
correct.
associated with any of this land? I mean, because I got pardon me for not knowing, but it seems that all of this oil that's coming out of the Bakken crude area, and obviously the Bakken crude area does extend. It doesn't stop at the border, obviously. So all of this, I know that there has been some complicity by Native people, tribal councils, both with some of these pipelines in the very beginning. So that's what I guess. What I'm trying to ask is, who is benefiting from this oil? Obviously, you aren't, but who is? And I'm more interested in the Native people who are exploiting this stuff, because I think those people have to be called held to task.
That's Southern.
So go ahead.
Yeah, that's Southern Chiefs. So when the Chiefs conference happened here in Ottawa, just this past winter, I went and confronted all the chiefs. I gave every one of these chiefs that were lining their pockets with my oil and knowing about it, I told them, I'll give you total leniency and I will not press charges on you, but you need to come clean with me now. And how embarrassing is this going to be for us as First Nations people, that you are lining your pockets with stolen oil and you're standing there and you're complaining about it? I said, so the government wants us to do this, so I'm going to give you a chance to come clean with me now, and I will show you total leniency, and I will not backcharge you, and I will not make you pay me back any money. I will let you guys go from here on, but you need to come clean with me now. And that one chief from Rosal River said to me, he goes, first I confronted him about that property, and I said, how did you get that property? And he said to me, he goes, an old farmer sold it to me. I said, and I gave him my eyes, and I looked at him, I said, we both know there's no old farmer. I said, how did you get that property? And I said, and if somebody impersonated my dad and sold you that property, I said, that's a breach, and that's fraud. And then he turned around and he said to me, he thought about it for a minute, and then I seen a scared look in his eyes, and I could see his heart just start racing, and that I could see his heart broke into 1,000 pieces, that he'd have to give up what he knew. So then he turns around and he says to me, well, that's on Treaty 1 property. And I looked at him, I said, I'm going to give you one opportunity to come clean with me here, and I'm going to show you some grace and some leniency. Please take my opportunity. He turned around and he said, I don't know what you're talking about, and it's on Treaty 1 property. I said, okay, I see where you stand on this. I'm gonna leave you be on this now. So I walked away from him and I left it at that. I turned around and I approached the new chief, that's at Saugeen First Nation, and I talked with him and I told him, I said, look, I said, Phil and everybody had a part of this, and I said, and I don't want to drag Saugeen through the mud through this, so what are you going to do to help me about this? And I want my mother's file on everything and all the properties my mother owned. Well, he was supposed to go back and look into that. No way, he never got back to me. I've been chasing him since. I phoned Saugeen so many times, and left threatening messages to them that they need to deal with me and accommodate and assist me and look into that with Southern Chief, and they refused.
Well, where do you
So
where do
that's
you
where
where
that
do you
part's
where do
at.
you see this? I mean, because obviously this is obviously a very involved case. So where do you see yourself in this thing
Yes.
right now? Just so we can kind of get a handle on this thing. And
Well, a lot of people.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, well, a lot of people thought that I was fighting this because they thought I'm money hungry and that I'm all about the oil. Okay, so I made it very clear to a lot of people, this is not about the oil. This is about what they did to my father. They forced my father into the worst home in Winnipeg, Manitoba, with all that money that my father had, and I begged and I pleaded with those lawyers that I wanted my father to have top of the line private care, and that I was willing to spend every last dime on him as long as he had top of the line care. They looked at me and they said no. So now I found out recently, between the doctors, the bankers, and the lawyers, they have a scam going where they target their clients, they give them medication to give them a stroke, and then they embezzle their estate. And then they think that they have all the papers. They check out where the family members are, and they think they have all the papers, and then they embezzle the estate.
But Carla, I guess what I'm trying
So
to
once
what I'm trying to understand is where is this at right now, and what is your plan going forward? I understand that there's got to be a lot of ugly history associated with this, but unfortunately we don't have that much time with this show to kind of turn over every pebble here. So I'm trying to figure out where you're at with this thing right now.
Since I released the $140 million document showing that my father had $140 million, and that was after they embezzled a big chunk of the estate, everybody refuses to talk to me and nobody will answer their phone. I have every MP in Canada with treason and violating their oath to Canada. They have another man on my dead father's bank accounts. They refuse to tell me. They have large withdrawals that they didn't report to FinTrack, which is also possibly funding terrorism.
I know, but Carla,
the military in there to rip all those people out.
You're still going off. I'm trying to figure out where you're at with this thing. Are you taking any legal action on the Canadian side or on the U.S. side? Because obviously, are you talking about some of the Bakken crude on the U.S. side, or only the Bakken crude on the Canadian side?
Well, Chipman supposedly did a big number with everything and took my gold bars and moved them to Washington, D.C. and started the biggest gold corporation there.
Carla,
Exactly
but you're going into more details of what they've done to you. I'm asking you, what are you doing to try to rectify this?
Okay, so what I've been doing is I keep sending emails and getting people to try to answer to this, and I even charged Justin Trudeau with concealing premeditated murder for Chris Chipman.
Let's stop there for a second. What do you mean? What do you mean you charged him? What does that mean exactly? I mean, have you brought a formal complaint against anybody on this?
Yes, I have. I've submitted 12 pages, actually 20 pages in total, to Winnipeg. I've gone through their special professional standards unit. I've gone through the other unit that's there. I've gone through everybody and every place that I'm supposed to, that's supposed to uphold the law. And I even reached out to the Attorney General not long ago that I was willing to break the law with all of them as long as Chris Chipman did an out-of-court settlement with me, and I would sign him over that oil legally and legitly, but just give me the residue of my estate. And they turned me down on that too. So now I'm going after the judge that signed off on all these illegal documents.
Well, you're going to have to stay. Keep me informed where this goes, because obviously this is obviously way too involved to just cover on a single radio show. But I would like to see where this thing goes. If you have any success with bringing a legal action against anybody, and find out specifically where the doors are being shut to you, because it seems to me if you have all this documentation, you should be able to find yourself a reasonable legal representation to hold these guys accountable.
No, all the lawyers across U.S., I phone right across the world, all the lawyers in U.S. and in Canada I've been blacklisted with them because it's like they're going to be a whistleblower.
So where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself? I mean, because obviously sending emails isn't going to get anything done.
Well, they're sure hanging themselves a hell of a lot more. And with Revenue Canada, I asked for my father's income tax papers, They sent me papers trying to tell me that he was an old age pension, and I just released a document of him having 140 million. What are they going to do about that now?
Yeah, I don't. Well, do me a favor. Stay in touch with me. Let me know where some of this goes. Where if you have any success on this thing, because I'm interested to see where this thing goes. It sounds right now like every channel you're trying, you're running into stone walls, and it seems to me that you've got to be able to find somebody who is willing to take on a case like this and pursue justice in the system. Because if it's being shut off to you, then it doesn't matter how much they hang themselves if you have no recourse. So do me a favor, stay in touch and let me know where this thing goes. You obviously can stay in touch as you have with me.
Well, hopefully this is the closest thing that I've gotten to media coverage. So I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
It looks like you're talking and.
There's a delay in the phone.
Yeah, there's a delay both in the phone and in the video. So don't worry about that. Just go ahead.
Oh, okay. So hopefully this is the closest I've gotten to media coverage, because they've squashed all media. And if you look up Chris Chipman and you see everything he bought, he owns Toronto Star, Forbes magazine, all of it. He's bought out all the media. I own CTV, by the way, as well, and he squashed all the media on me. So this is the closest I've gotten to any coverage, and hopefully this will go viral.
Well, let's see what happens with it. I appreciate you giving a call and filling us in on your story, and let us know. Stay in touch with me, and let's see where this goes.
Good luck to you, Carla.
And I would like to also email you the doc so that you also know I'm not full of shit. Sorry to say that on the air, but I would like to send you the doc so that you're aware that this is legal and legit. And if you look up any history between Brian Bowman and the Chipmans, when he came into being a mayor in Winnipeg, he questioned everything that they were doing, and then 2 weeks later he changed the story.
Well, we'll do that. I'll get you my email address so you can send me some of the literature. I appreciate it. Thanks for calling in, and thanks for connecting up with us.
Oh, and thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. There's so much more that's going on, but we'll catch up.
All right. Thank you. Again, powerful stuff cool. There. We know that that the corruption associated with the exploitation of natural resources on native lands runs deep. I mean, just watching Donald Trump sit down with a bunch of leaders last week. There's a whole room full of people that are looking at Trump as if he claims he was going to free them. He was going to provide them with the freedom to bring their natural resources to market. In other words, I'm going to exploit the natural resources. And it's one of the things that I've said before about Brian Clattersby, who was the president of the NCAI. I remember when he gave his State of the Indian Nations address, he said that 20% of the United States natural resource or energy resources are on native lands. Just the idea that he suggested that 20% of their resources are on our lands is part of the problem. And so this is obviously what Carla has faced, both with with her claims to land and resources that have been exploited. But we see it in every place.
Seen the Trump press thing, they had all the natives sitting there.
Yeah, that's what we were just saying.
Talking about their energy independence is going to be their energy strength or something. I forget his. Yeah,
he's talking about him strengthening, oil companies' bottom line. It wasn't about us being energy independent, because they're exploiting it for their own purposes, which is kind of the whole point of the whole thing. I don't know. It's look, I was glad to hear. It's nice to have somebody call through on our CKWE line. Glad to hear it. I do, and I guess this does tie in a little bit, because this is the thing. We have to understand how we challenge these things and how we fight, which was really the theme of the show. I know it doesn't matter how right you are. If you can't build up the strategy for confronting or being diplomatic. It sounds like she's put some offers out there. I mean, and they have been rebuffed. But I think to really be a strong diplomat, you have to have a strong legal position in the first place. So when we're talking about fighting New York State, for instance, or the federal government, our first and foremost position is that you have no claim to suggest that we have surrendered our sovereignty to you. We've never consented to subjugation. So that's the hard line position we take. Then like with New York State, and even with the Sean John case, the idea that the state is asserting authority that they don't have. In fact, the judge, essentially agrees with that. So understanding that they're violating their own laws is part of what we have to have enough intelligence to be able to do that. Then we can talk about international law, and then beyond what the international norms are, we should be able to assert flat out, regardless of state, federal, or international legal norms, we still retain our inherent rights, the ones that exist in the absence of some tribunal of lawyers and judges, whether it's at the international level, federal level, or state level. You don't have the authority to judge us when you consider the fact that we predate your existence, and there's nothing in that entire history of our relationship on our own lands that suggests that we have somehow consented to you or submitted to you. Now, that's not to suggest that you haven't asserted authority and sometimes the force, but you trying to force subjugation is not the same thing as us consenting to it. And I think understanding all of those details, and obviously Carla has a huge challenge ahead of her. It sounds like she is not finding that strategy. So the whole point is, it's interesting that she called for this show, because understanding that path forward is the key to success. And whether it's finding the not the sympathetic ear, but the ear that's willing to hear you, and the human being that may have to sit across the table from you, who is willing to look at that information. And I think that's part of the challenge.
It's kind of a hard concept to grab too, because she's been attacking it at so many different angles. You're not really quite sure where she's at on
well,
this.
and obviously there's a native component. There's her father was non-native, so there is going to be land title and mineral rights titles that may span that question from things like native rights to just mineral and property rights within Canadian law. So it does. This is tricky. It's always tricky, because one of the things that we have to understand is we're in the strongest position when we are holding true to who we are, our identity. Now, I know that identity can be confused when you talk about mixed ethnicities and that kind of stuff. But I think when we can take a strong native position on the whole thing, at least when we begin this art of diplomacy, it's a stronger position than to say, well, I've got Canadian law that I can use, I've got sovereignty I can use, I've got provincial law I can use, and then I can point to all of the corruption along the way. Sometimes it doesn't matter if none of those arrows can be pulled out of your quiver. Then it doesn't matter how much ammunition you have. So I think that's the strategy. I think being able to maintain a solid position from a native position, from a sovereignty position, I think is the strongest. And I think when you concede something, whether it's a state, federal, provincial, federal, whatever it is, when you have to concede and you say, well, I'm going to take this strategy, and this can be deal with everything from these truth and reconciliation commissions, that exist both at state levels. Maine had its own Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Canada has initiated a Truth and Reconciliation Commission associated with residential schools. They will, using their systems to investigate missing and murdered Indigenous women is not the same thing as us initiating our own process for flushing some of that out. I'm not saying we should oppose what they claim they're attempting to do, but if we throw all of our eggs into their basket, there may be nothing coming back to us on it. So, again, I think when we talk about the strategy for fighting back, we have to have both a legal position sometimes even a physical position, an ownership and legitimate physical position on something. But we also have to know at the end of the day, there is compromise, and that compromise doesn't mean that you sell out. It means that you work towards a solution. Skana, again, is not the absence of conflict. It is the quest to retain balance and harmony out of conflict. So I think that's that's at this point the best advice I can give to Carla, knowing having the limited knowledge that she was able to share with us today. She has to, in spite of all the information and all the documents she may have, she's going to have to really come to terms with a strategy that's going to be the most effective.
Be diligent.
Yeah, be diligent. That's for sure. That's for sure.
We shall persevere.
Yeah, well, I mean, and whatever that means. I mean, because I think to persevere or to overcome, as they say, we shall overcome. It is really hard to overcome the extent to which people have betrayed you, and especially those people who've been propped up as leadership. So whether it's a chief or a council or legal representative, or even those guys who sit representing the non-native interest, who have an obligation. Their obligation isn't to screw us. So, I mean, even if I say that they don't represent us, they still have an obligation to be truthful and forthright. And so I think when we see these people who are so devious, and we know, I mean, again, you look through history and you see how many people have been again corrupt. That's tough. That's
just
tough.
thinking about the song choice here too. Universal Soldier.
Yeah. Look, we're gonna go out. We'll play out Buffy St. Marie and Universal Soldier. We'll play it out through the show. Again, Buffy performing in New York City at Central Park's Summer Stage. That's Sunday night from 6 to 10 p.m. with A Tribe Called Red in Iskway. If you're in New York, by all means, check her out. But you know what? Look at her music. She's got some new stuff that she's coming out with, and she's as relevant today as she was in the mid '60s. So give her a listen, and use her music. Use it. Thanks. Yahweh.
Yeah.
Will kill you for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA, and he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan, and he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting